All right. Well, hey, let's get into it. So, welcome, dude. Thank you so much for coming on, everybody. This is Wes Knight, professional soccer player, or retired, that is. Is that correct?
Yeah, man. I let that go a couple of years ago. It was nice while it lasted, man, but I let it go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was watching some of your videos on YouTube, and dude, you, holy crap, talk about the hustler, man. You could just see yourself running past these dudes like you got it in you. You're going, dude. You're hauling ass and just, dude, flying by the guys. It just looks like you work that much harder, and that's kind of brought us to probably the reason I'm talking to you right now is because I've been putting stuff out online that's, all about motivation and self-improvement and, getting your head in the right place. And someone put me in contact with you, which was an old friend from college, actually. She's like, you got to check out this guy. So I looked on your profile and saw like all these, the same stuff that just jives with me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to ask this guy to come on. So thank you, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, listen, man, I'm honored. I can remember in the space that I was in when I was trying to grind to find podcast guests and trying to make sure that you could vet them and they'd be interesting for your guests. And so, or your listeners. And listen, man, I'm just appreciative that you take the time to unpack it. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. Seriously, that's awesome. So tell us a little, I'd like to even know a little bit more backstory on you. Give us a little run through about, where you started, where you grew up, and where you are now, and how that's all transformed.
Oh man, where do I start? Okay. Easily South Carolina. None of you have ever heard of it. Closest thing that you would have probably heard of, guys, is Clemson University, which is about 20 minutes outside of where I grew up. And I was, born and raised from a very humble family. My dad was an educator. My mom worked part-time and kind of raised the kids, and they were fantastic parents. They did the best they could with what they had, but they always structured our upbringing, the upbringing of my brother and myself. They always structured our upbringing with so much it was all predicated around what you kind of opened the podcast with, which was work ethic, man. There was not a day that went by where my brother and I were home from school where we weren't asked to do some sort of task within the house and yard work or this and that and the other, going and doing yard work for friends or relatives. And I mean, it was your conventional childhood, but inside of my heart, I'll never forget this, man. I was like 8 years old, and I'll never forget if my room, not too long ago, a couple of years ago, I took down all the posters that were originally in my room. But I remember putting up the very first poster of a professional athlete ever in my room, and it was Joe Montana. And I like Joe Montana because my dad's a Notre Dame guy, and he was just super calm and smooth, and he was fun to watch because he was good, and I was a young kid. And I just remember when Joe Montana would take his football helmet off, I remember just how cool he looked and how much fun it looked to be able to perform in front of all those people and play a sport at that level. And so from that moment, I remember just being obsessed with professional athletics, like the best of the best athletes. So in my room, from a young kid, I had like posters of the Brazilian national soccer team. I had posters of like Mia Hamm. I had posters of Barry Sanders, Michael Jordan. Lou Holtz was a coach that I really liked. Like there was no white space in my room because all I thought about and all I wore to school and the only thing I ever did was desire to become a pro athlete. And luckily, I was gifted. I was one of the more athletic people in my city. So I was able to play a lot of sports from youth, and going with that same narrative, like the hustle and the work ethic. If I wasn't the best player in that sport, I was gonna outwork the person, and that was kind of the mantra. My old man always he always told me, if you fall down 7 times, stand up 8. And so from then, I just it was just more of my upbringing was more of how do I continue to create a reality? And I didn't even know I was doing this, but when you step back and talk about manifestation and like, how do I create a reality that's built around what it is that I love to do? So most decisions that I made in my life, when they weren't decisions that I had no control over, like if my parents were telling me to do something, but every decision that I would make would be predicated on some sort of athletic endeavor. So if it was basketball season, I was outside playing basketball. If it was football season, I was outside playing football. Soccer, same thing, rinse and repeat. So every day I was working and getting better at something that involved athletic movement. And so from there, man, it just kind of unfolded from there, man. I got the opportunity to play at the College of Charleston as a soccer player. Was a recruited walk-on, kind of slept on. People didn't really know who I was because I was from a small city.
The underdog.
I've been the underdog my entire life. Man.
I love that
story of resilience. And then from there, man, I'll never forget. And we can talk about this a little bit further. And it's part of the narrative that I talk about whenever I give my speaking engagements. There's this kind of a moment in your life where you go from when you think you can do something, and then you shift to where you believe you can do something. And there was this moment after the second year of my college season where I took a trip down to Bradenton, Florida, to try to see. This is where it was called the Professional Development League, and this is where the area's best collegiate soccer players were coming down. They all were trying to play for this one coach. The coach's name was Tom Durkin. And I mean, you're talking about people from Ohio, Michigan, California, Texas, people from the best players from big schools coming to play. There were 22. It was a 22 spot roster. So I get in my car, fill it up with like all of the clothes in the back because there was no way I was coming home. Right? I was preparing for an entire summer. I wasn't preparing for like just a weekend and getting cut from this team. Like,
yeah, you were all in.
I'm in. Like, no one there is gonna beat me.
Yep, I love that, dude.
And I will say, I got there, and sure enough, there were probably 28, 30 people vying for a 22-man roster because it had, the coach had vetted the people before they came down. And I was probably number 25 of that 23, 22.
Yes.
I knew where I was. There were players much, much better than me. They had come from environments much better than my own. But because my work rate and because of my athletic ability, I got an opportunity.
That's awesome.
Simply because the coach believed in that. And from that moment, when he believed in me, the thought of me becoming a pro athlete transition from a thought to a belief. Yep. And then and this is where I'd love to talk a little bit more. Once you can transition a thought to a belief system, then it changes the way you behave. And when it changes the way you behave, it changes the way you take actions, changes the way your reality responds, and then it just manipulates everything else moving forward. So my life has started from humble beginnings, but that mantra of giving your best effort, working hard, and continuing to stand up when life hits you has just been the mantra.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a little bit of an obsession there, and in a good way. I think that obsession sometimes gets a bad name, but it sounds like you were, when I said all in, you were going to do that, and that's because you loved it. You felt it in your heart that this has to be mine, and you made that happen. Is that something that do you think kind of coincides with that hard work ethic, or like is that like your upbringing, or if someone doesn't have that, can someone create that inside themselves? Can you manifest, like you were saying, can you manifest that drive? Do you think
that's a great question, and that's the age old, chicken before the egg. At the end of the day, nature versus nurture. I'm not sure if my dad hadn't and my mom hadn't developed me in those very important years of my development, if I would still behave in that manner. I really do think that there's a part of that blueprint in my behavioral makeup, the DNA, that that comes from that upbringing. I'm not 100% sure that if after 15, 18, 20 years old that you can just all of a sudden become the most driven individual. You can work on your drive and develop your drive to be more than the next individual. I do know that when you are aligned in your passion and when you care about something consistently, that it is easier to push yourself further than what you would do in something that you are not passionate
Totally.
about.
Yes.
So whether you feel like you have the same amount of drive as me or Gary Vee or the next individual that you're watching on television, what you have to remember is the reason they're driving towards that is because they love it and they're passionate about it. They're not driving towards something they're not passionate about, or else you wouldn't know who they are.
Yeah, right. That's
Professional
so true.
athletes become professional athletes because they fucking love it. Excuse
Yep.
me if we, like,
No. Go for it, man. I love it.
show. Listen, a professional athlete doesn't become a professional athlete if he doesn't fucking love it and is passionate about it. You got to beat your body up. You got to push yourself to exhaustion day in, day out. You have to love something to do that. And so the reason people will sit in those stories of I don't have the drive, I'm not ambitious enough, is just because they're not aligned.
Yep.
They're not aligned in what it is that they truly love. Because when you slide into that place of passion, that place of alignment, there's it's like this metaphorical you go from pushing yourself there to you begin to be pulled there. And like it's almost this metaphysical energy that just continues to get you up and pull you towards what it is that you want to get in. So for any of your listeners who are thinking, man, I may not be as passionate as the other person, like that's the wrong thought process. It's I haven't found something I'm passionate in yet. And if you flip that narrative, it'll help you save yourself from that negative self-talk, which is damaging.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. Some people think that, geez, why, where does he get that from? And I think you just hit home. It comes from a space of passion and love and desire to have this thing that, drive. It's an internal drive, and I think that thing has to be much bigger than you too. It can't be the nice car. It can't be the money. It's got to be something larger, right? Like for me, it's like creating a lifestyle of freedom. Freedom to me is everything that I work for. Every day I wake up and say, how can I get closer to owning my life instead of trading time for money? How do I figure out how to, create something that is bigger than me, so I provide for my family, so I can do all these things that I want to do. So that's what drives me is freedom. What drives you now? Actually, let's go into a little bit. Let's keep going down the road of your story, and then we'll kind of get into some other things there. Where are you at now, and going from the soccer position in that place? What happened? Were you just like, I'm done? Like, let's keep going down that road there.
Yeah, so great question, and this will lead to kind of the reason that you're talking about my why. So I got an excellent opportunity in that college, that summer professional development league, got the excellent opportunity for 2 seasons to play for that team, and that's when it turned from a thought to a belief that my entire behavior patterns in college changed. I went to another gear. I trained like a maniac. I was the fittest guy. I was working on my technique. I knew what I needed to do now because I had seen the best players in the world or in the United States in college. So I knew that there was more to be done. So anyways, I worked to get it. 2009 Super Draft came and it went. And I was in the MLS Combine. Thought my agent was telling me I was going to get drafted second round of the Chicago Fire. I came and went. I watched 4 rounds of the MLS Super Draft go by, and once again, just like college, I was in the underdog position. So Vancouver Whitecaps called me up right after the draft. They're like, "We cannot believe you fell out of the draft. You had a stellar draft, but we would love to offer you a contract." So I'm like, 100%, Vancouver, British Columbia. Are you kidding me? So at 21, 22 years old, I'm extracted from Charleston, South Carolina, and I land in a new country. in an incredible city, and my professional career was born. Loved it. Played 7 great years. Lived in Vancouver for 4 of those years, almost 5. And it really developed me to a new space. While I was in Vancouver, I fell in love with the city. I took care of the fans. I couldn't imagine having 28,000 people watching me play. It was a dream come true. So I was giving back to the fans as much as I could. Was voted fan favorite in 2010. And then all of a sudden, I had this massive knee injury. And this knee injury, I tore my ACL and obliterated my cartilage. And the doctor, when I woke up out of surgery, told me, "Hey, Wes, you'd be better off if you never played again."
Oh, jeez.
From that moment, I'm like 5 years into my career, and I'm thinking, "Fuck me!" Like,
yeah,
that is the one thing no athlete wants to hear. It was supposed to be a routine ACL surgery. I'm excited to get back playing in 4 months, and now the doctor's telling me if I'm wise, I'll never play again. And so from there, it shifted me into this entire new sort of thought pattern. I shifted from hope and belief to despair and to victim and fear and sadness. And whatever you think about most often becomes a pattern that becomes more dense, and it started to affect the way I felt. It started to affect the way I showed up to other people. And before too long, man, I was dealing with massive mental illness. It was the first time that I had ever seen, felt, or dealt with depression. And it was upon me before I even was aware that I was dealing with it. So like there were months of me dealing with not being able to get out of bed, being jealous of my girlfriend, who at the time was just beginning her endeavor. She's now a really successful YouTube influencer. She was just beginning that. I was seeing how good she was, how passionate she was about it. I was looking at my legs sitting in a controlled passive motion machine for 8 hours a day, thinking my life is over. I don't have any other skills. Like I didn't finish college, so I knew school. I sucked at school, man. I was terrible at school. All I did all day was think about how to get better in soccer, and I needed more money to drink beers, so I would like go to Abercrombie and Fitch and buy stuff off the sales rack. I remember getting a job at Abercrombie and Fitch just so I could get a discount. I'd buy the clothes at a discount, go back to school in my apartment, flip onto eBay, and I'd flip Abercrombie and Fitch clothes. Just like this, I was a born entrepreneur. I was this born hustler that did not understand the traditional school system, and it just didn't work for me. So the two things I cared about, which was professional sports and at that time making money or like having enough to get by, I couldn't do either of those things. So I was sinking my savings trying to stay alive because I couldn't work. I didn't have a contract, and my entire world was caving in until one day I had the most severe experience I've ever been through, the most traumatic, which is my first panic attack. And for any of your listeners, or even Mitch, I'm not sure if you've had one of those before, it is the single worst experience I've ever been through. And from that moment forward, it was almost as if I was always looking over my shoulder for the next panic attack. I kept feeling like the next one was just right around the corner. And I got to a place where I couldn't even be around people, and I'm like one of the most extroverted humans there are.
Yeah, you seem like it.
I couldn't even be around people. It was just too much to be around people. I felt like I was going to suffocate, couldn't breathe. So slowly but surely I was reclusive, and there was a point, Mitch, where I was like barely leaving the house of my ex-girlfriends. And from that place, I began to get suicidal. So I was thinking, okay, if this is what my life is going to be like for the rest of my life, I'm not going to have soccer. I don't have a plan. I'm going broke. I was like, I would rather exit this reality and just end this, because I don't want to experience this for the rest of my life. So at that point, I was in a real dark space. And I can remember, long story boring, there's this bridge in Vancouver, British Columbia called the Lionsgate Bridge. And I was riding my bike one day, didn't have a car, had to sell that to have enough money to keep a roof over my head. And dude, I got off my bike and I laid my bike up against the bridge, and I was beginning to cry. I had made the decision, like, all right, if I'm going to do it, this is the day I'm going to do it. It's like a dark, kind of gloomy day, and I lay my bike against one of the columns, and I just put my hand on the bridge, and tears are rolling down my face, but like I've already made this decision. Like, I tried to find a space where the railings weren't high enough. I could easily climb over it. And there's people that take their life all the time off this bridge.
Jeez.
You hear about it all the time. And I started to climb, Mitch, like literally was climbing my way to hop over the side and take a leap, man. And I can remember just this voice, my mom's voice in my ear. It was loud. It was loud and clear as day. And it was just like, you're going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. And I remember it like sending chills, and I'm even getting chills now. I'm thinking,
dude, you just gave me the chills. Good.
And my mom, full disclosure, my mom's father committed suicide. So I know what that has done to her. And in that moment, I literally decided, I cannot do this to her. I cannot do this to her again. And for that reason, I like stopped, and I just walked myself back down off the bridge. My feet were probably only about 8-9 feet off the ground. I wasn't really that high, but I had already made the decision, right? And so from that point forward, I just had to figure out, with no money, no skills. I couldn't pay to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I couldn't get in contact with the psychologists of the teams that I worked for. They didn't recognize my number. They weren't responding. I had to figure out how to put the pieces back together little by little. And it started with exercise. First thing, when I could start moving again, I just started going to pull-up bars and riding a bike more often. And then from there, belief and confidence started to come again. And from that point moving forward, I became obsessed with mindset, Mitch, and how to get back to the belief, the confidence, and the execution that got me to where I knew I could get, you know? Mm-hmm. And so that is my why behind everything I do now. How can I help people who feel like they are stuck, who feel like they have no way to change their reality, help them focus on their mindset, on their belief systems, and the way that they talk to themselves, their thoughts, to help them change that, recognize that, build awareness around that, and then move towards a life that they truly desire. So long story, boring. There's a lot of pieces there, and it was extremely unorganized, but that's where we are today with
man, you just brought me on a roller coaster of emotions. I swear, like my heart's like pounding. That is insane. And I think there's a lot of similar situations and stories and people just like yourself that are going through that right now. And if there's anybody that could help them, it would definitely be someone that's already been there, and that's you. Geez. So with that, say I have some of those similar situations. Is that something that do you work one-on-one with people, or what is
that? No. So, and that's a great question. My desire was to create a conversation, a place where a conversation could exist, where I could help people at scale. It wasn't about becoming a life coach. It wasn't about anything other than I knew I wanted to speak. I knew I wanted to talk about this, but I didn't desire to become a psychiatrist or a psychologist or become a life coach. What I desired was to just open up the conversation.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's where the podcast began. It's like, all right, let's talk about mental illness. Let's pull back the mask here, and let's really talk about what you've been through in your life and how that has allowed you to become who you are today, and who do you desire to be moving forward. So from there, the podcast was just a space for me to speak on how I felt and to have conversations with other people to see what got them through.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you guys don't know, I'll share everything, down below as always, but he created a podcast, and he's had some crazy guests on here. I'm looking at this list, man. This is awesome. So go over to creatingspacemovement.com and check out some of these podcasts. I want to check. I got to listen to the one that we were talking about the other day. I gotta check that out. You have a couple crazy guests on here, which is awesome. And then this, you got a Mindset Monday. What is that? Is that kind of just a podcast focused on getting your mental in the right place, or what is that exactly?
Yeah. Mindset Monday is just an opportunity for me to speak about something that's on my heart at the time, whatever I'm feeling,
okay.
right? That where my focus is, what I feel passionate about. I just hit the record button and
that's sweet. I love that.
And get after it on that. And then the Thursdays is when the interview will happen, where I'll bring in someone and just chat.
That's sweet. To me, there's a couple of things that stand out to me, and one with you, it's like you're totally okay with getting out of your comfort zone. One situation was that soccer thing. You went to that thing. There's a lot of people that would they'd get in the car and then they'd shut the door and be like, "What am I doing? Can I do this?" You know what I mean? Like and then these podcasts where you get on, he gets on live. Make sure you guys follow him on Instagram. He'll jump on a live stream and just go, and I love that and admire that. Is that something that you've always done, and is that something that you always push yourself to do? Is hey, get out of my comfort zone? Because personally, I've been trying to do that more as well, and I kind of struggle with getting out and meeting new people, and that's something that I'm personally working on. Is go out and put yourself in hard places, and you just grow so much.
Yeah, listen, Mitch, at the end of the day, the thought patterns that we have are some people call it the enemy, some people call it fear. What you can convince yourself of, either positive or negative, becomes your reality at the end of the day. So if you are sitting in your environment, inside your apartment, and you're thinking, man, I am a recluse, I want to be exclusive, I don't want to be around people, I'm an introvert, I am not good at this, I'm not good at that. All of a sudden, you'll create this story, this narrative that will soon become your identity.
Yep.
So where I like to lead is through example. When I feel like I don't have what it takes, I immediately will write down what that fear is, and it's a great tactic.
Okay, I like that.
A lot of people identify goals.
Yep.
I like to identify when a fear comes up, what that fear is, and then I like to look at it. The current fears I'm having right now is the next fear is getting to the next level of brand awareness. So from this component of being a former athlete, now a business owner, the next fear, the most prominent fear in my life right now is creating more content around being a business owner. Because for me, it's easy to talk about my athletic career. I've done it. It's easy for me to talk about mental illness and mindset. I've done it. It's easy for me to talk about a podcast. I've done it. But we're talking with business owners, sitting in the seat around other business owners and talking business. Kid's a rookie. So there's a lot of fear I have around that. So constantly, every day, I've got to map my fear. I've got to look at it. And when I identify, I have to say, okay, is that truth or is that a story? And then if I believe it's the truth, then I can move around with a plan of how to get around that fear. If I believe it's a story, then I can unpack the story and see where it comes from. And I think the reason that most people get caught in paralysis by analysis is because they don't understand that their fear is a story. They're convincing themselves because it's easier to play safe. It's not easier to fail, especially in public, right? But what people need to remember is that through the failures where you expand, your capacity to deal with discomfort expands, your skill set expands, your tools, it expands, your ability to resist failure again, it expands. You grow as a human. We talk about the word growth so much today, but we don't understand that growth comes from failure. They are one and the same. So when you repurpose your ideal with fear, you call it another name. Mm-hmm. If you just call it growth, all of a sudden it feels different to you. I'm going through growth. I'm dealing with growth. replace fear with growth in that same sentence, and all of a sudden it looks a lot different. And so this is why our thoughts are so important, and how they generate emotions, which generate actions, which generate behavior, which generate reality. So it's this long system, man, that we probably don't have enough time on a podcast to really unpack.
Yeah, dude, that is amazing. All this stuff is just gold, dude. Thank you. So we're coming to the end. I'd like to provide the audience with something that they can walk away with today, something that they can do to get started on this journey. They want to go down a road of self-improvement. They want to change their mindset. Is there one thing that you would kind of like to kickstart that journey for them? Is it, maybe writing down those fears and figuring out how to navigate through them in a different way? Or,
sure.
Yeah, could you give us something there?
Listen, man, there are a lot of tools and tips that you'll hear from all different types of people, and I think that it's most important that you always develop what works for you. But here's some things that work for me. Number one, I have a gratitude and a fear practice every morning. So it's just a part of my morning now. When I'm getting ready, I have my cup of coffee. Shout out to Summit Coffee, who's a client and a great partnership of creating space. So when I have a cup of Summit Coffee, I will sit down and I have my gratitude journal. And inside that gratitude journal, I put a column for what fears are coming up today. So I can identify what I'm grateful for, and I can also identify what's standing in my way. Because if we don't know what's standing in our way, then we can't create an alternate route. Yep. Right? So those are two things that are important to me. I got to know what I'm grateful for, and then I got to know what's helping me grow. Like what fear am I dealing with? Okay. But if I focus on all one, then my problem with gratitude, is if you focus totally on gratitude, when fear comes along, sometimes that focus on gratitude will force you to ignore the reality of what's actually happening. But when you have an ability to stop for a second and recognize fear, right? To look at fear, it's uncomfortable to do it, but then all of a sudden you take power away from fear. Then you can shift it into gratitude. Then you can be thankful for it, but not if you run away from it.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? So next thing I would say, so mapping out your fear, mapping out your gratitude, people will talk about that all the time. The next thing I think is the one piece, this is probably the one thing that amounts to the success I've had in every other industry and avenue, is having a mentor, having a coach, period. If I would not recommend taking on any job or pursuing any direction without looking through the pathway that someone else in that industry has already created. Because if they've done it and they've had success, it's proven. Okay, so whether I'm in a college kid trying to get to the pro level, I've got to go to Florida to play for the coach everyone wants to play for.
Yep.
Right? If I'm in the MLS and I want to continue to get better at a move, I've got to watch who on the field, right, on YouTube. I got to watch videos of Cristiano Ronaldo. I've got to watch videos of Messi and Ronaldinho. I've got to see how the best of the best are doing it in order for me to have a pathway. Even LeBron hires Hakeem Olajuwon in the offseason to help him with his low post game, right? Every offseason, LeBron's bringing in a coach or a mentor to help him out on another facet. And the last thing I'd give to your audience is to talk about what they're afraid of, what they're dealing with, to open up conversation about their fears. And if they feel as though their mindset is slipping, they're falling into a saddened space, if you feel like you need help, whether you're a male and an alpha dominant male, or you're a female and you feel like you've been positioned as this strong female your entire life, whatever, regardless of where you've been and what's happened to you, when you can start to talk about what you're dealing with, you take power away from it. You simply take power away from it. So if you feel like you need help, or you feel like what you're dealing with mentally, that you need to have emancipation from it, you need help, talk, dial up a friend, a confidant, someone that you know is strong enough to receive what you're going to give them, and trust that in opening up that conversation, you begin the healing process. So those would be tips that I would give. But at the end of the day, man, I think it's best that everyone finds what works for them, man. And we're all cut different cloth,
Yeah. That mentorship that you touched on there, I mean, this is something that me personally, I'm still looking for a good mentor. Is there a good way to reach out to people such as you? Is there a good way to reach out to, is it finding the person that you want to be and then kind of looking at who's in his circle, or what would be the strategy behind that? Because I mean, I'm looking for it right now.
Yeah, I think, listen, social media connects everyone. Yep. So let's start there. But the most important thing I think you need to always consider when you're idolizing someone, or you're wanting to map what they've been doing, right, or model it, I think that you need to consider all facets, taking a look at their lifestyle, asking a real question. Is this what I really want? Am I doing this because their highlight reel on social media is this the truth?
Yeah.
Is this actually what I want?
Yep.
And making a real informed decision before you go to reach out to someone, because a lot of what you see on social is not the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
So even though I'm directing you to social media because that's a place that we all can communicate, we all know that we need to carry forward with caution when it goes to judging someone's lifestyle. But as far as communication, let's say a guy like myself, Lewis Howes, got motivated, great podcast, School of Greatness podcast, as well as a businessman. He's a salesman at the end of the day. I took a look for a while, and I was watching what he was doing, and I was taking a look at all of the things he was creating. And it wasn't until I started to see how consistent he was that I knew that he was the real deal in his space. And because he was consistent and he showed up time after time, other people wanted to work with him. So all I began to do was every other piece of content that he'd come out with, I start to engage with him in a convo in the comments. Man, Lewis, love this. I just talked about this in my mindset on my podcast. Oh, Lewis, this is great, right? Oh, there'd be times where sometimes I'd ask him a question like, "Are you sure you believe it?" I'm not so sure I believe, And slowly but surely, 2 years later, I was helping Lewis Howes set up his speaking engagement here in Charlotte, North Carolina. From that standpoint, I was helping a guy that I had been modeling and watching for years. And that simply came from a structure of being courageous enough to reach out and consistently commenting on Lewis. Because although Lewis does have a team helping him with his social, Lewis is still there. Lewis, he's not big enough now where he's not dealing with his social media presence.
Yeah. Yep.
So engaging with your idols, having conversations, imagining if they were your friends and they were in the same room, if they would write a post that you like, it's not about just liking it and having a hollow like. It's about connecting with them, engaging with them, being consistent with that to where they will recognize you. And at that point, then you can slide into their DMs, carry the conversation to another space where they will then be motivated to want to look at it or respond. And then from there, you slowly and organically build the friendship. It's just like when you're courting a female in a bar, or you're finding a new friend that's a teammate or at work. You don't immediately go up to the girl at the bar and ask her if she'll come home with you. At least you have to engage in a piece of conversation first, right?
Yeah.
If you've got a new friend at work, first thing you got to do, compliment them. It's the same thing in the social space.
Yep.
It's more of the slow play, and it's much more advantageous in the long run.
That's awesome, man. All right, perfect. Well, hey, dude, that was awesome. Thank you so much for having or coming on the podcast here. One last question: is that whiteboard something? Is that something that, just because I'm a whiteboard fan here, what is that? And is that something you wake up? Is that kind of just a dream board, or what do you got going on there?
So this right now is part of my business is an ad agency. So I help businesses run Instagram, Facebook ads to generate more awareness on their business. So right now, what's on it are a bunch of problems that new clients have on it, and the ways that I'm going to solve that problem, solutions for the problems. But most normally, hopefully, if I'm onboarding clients and I don't have as many problems as I need to solve right now, this is a vision board.
Okay.
So
cool.
This is where am I headed, and what do I need to get there? And identifying real people that I see throughout the landscape of my industry who I want to connect with. This is my vision and how I'm going to execute it. And if I could turn the camera around here, you'd see all sorts of sticky notes. I keep sticky notes everywhere.
Yeah.
These all are positive affirmations. These are all, goals.
Yeah.
And values. And right here in the very center of my TV, it says "Give the gift," which is if you have a gift in something, it's your job to build it.
Yep.
It's your job to share it, right?
Yep.
So positive affirmations, vision board, or strategy board of it, just like you have behind you.
Yeah, that's awesome. How important is that for you to have that? I mean, I kind of preach this to the people that are closest to me, to write things down and to, where are you going? Why? Well, first of all, why are you going? And then the steps to get there. How important is that for you?
Well, listen, man, I have heavy ADHD. So if I don't write it down, I forget it. And if I don't write it down, it's not real to me. And if I don't talk about it, it's not real to me.
Yep.
So for me, it's a lifeline. I've got notebooks all over the place. But for others, it may not be. So for me, that's a part of everyday practice. It helps me identify the tasks I need to get done, and it helps me stay on course with positive affirmations.
I love that, positive affirmations. I think I just read this. It's called the Pomodoro Effect, I think. There's a book. I think that's what it's called. I'll link it down below. But it talks about the positive affirmations and putting that into your daily routine. So I'm going to look further into that. But anyways, hey, man, thank you so much. Wow, that was awesome. I appreciate everything that you do. I'm going to continue to follow you on social. I'm going to stalk your website here. And thank you for coming on. And I'll stay in touch with you, buddy.
100%.
Keep spreading the goodness. I love it.
All right, my guy.
Take care.